Hey guys, it's Toniko Pantoja, and today I want to talk about AI art and generative AI art. Now, I know this is a very controversial topic, ranging from morality to ethical issues, a hot topic discussion of the creative, artistic process. Now, there's a lot of discussions about AI, and I don't want to get too much into it because AI isn't something that I currently use in my creative work, and there's many reasons regarding to that. Whether it's a creative process, I do think that the ethical issues with AI is pretty bad. The biggest issue is that there's a lot of stolen data within it, data taken without consent, or data that's taken from very private information. I feel like a lot of the AI art community is pretty weird. Many who never really had interest in the process of art, and a handful of them taking joy in actual artists' misery. And I can see signs where AI can create an unhealthy relationship with tech in general. And that's something that I'm going to touch upon later in the video. You can read about all the ethical issues that AI has, but in this video I do want to talk about just focusing on one topic. Is generative AI good for artistic growth? So this AI discussion has definitely made me reflect on my relationship with art, or just making stuff. So I know there are people who watch my channel that aren't necessarily artists themselves. So the only thing that I can do is talk about when I make something, whether it's art or a creative project, what is that process like? So first of all, I get an idea, a sense of inspiration. This is the ignition that makes me go, oh, I want to make something. I want to make art. I want to make a creative project. Then the next step is trying to figure out what this idea is, and that means wrestling with your relationship to that idea and trying to figure out what this creative project is and what this creative project isn't. And that all ties down to your background, your upbringing. What's the core factor of your project? Are there any themes or thematic themes that you want to showcase in your work? And the next big part is the overall process. This is you just making the creative project. So what falls under the process? Well, it's a pipeline, it's a procedure. But what also happens here is there's a sense of self-discovery, there's skill growth, you're learning stuff from it, you're making something for yourself or for other people, there's things clicking for you. There's a lot of great things that comes with the process, but in the process also comes with things like self-doubt, frustration, dealing with errors and mistakes, energy and time. Maybe you're dealt with limited circumstances and resources. It's the stuff that people say when they're making something. They go, oh, I hate this stage, or I hate this part. Oh man, this is tough, this is hard, this sucks. So you're wrestling with your own ego, your own heart and soul to make this thing happen. Now, I'm not saying that every artist goes through some crisis when making something, but I will say that the mixture of both the positives and the negatives of the process is what gives a lot of artists meaning and purpose. An artist who actually had to go through the grind of making something from beginning to scratch understands that this process has a lot of self-discovery. At the end of this, we have the outcome or the result, the finished piece, or as artists would say, abandoned, because art is never truly finished, but abandoned. So while this can also talk about the end result of the product, it can also be how this product or this creative process performs outside. Does it gain you clout? Does it gain you success and fortune? Does it open opportunities? So what I personally think is that over time, we started stressing out more on the outcome and the final result of the project more so than the process. And what I think about AI and how a lot of people online use AI is that it either removes the process part or makes it super minuscule and super convenient. So I personally think that the process is where a lot of artists grow. And if the way AI is used that removes the whole process stage and makes it super convenient, then how is that good for artistic growth? I mean, sure, maybe there are some inconveniences with the AI not turning out the result that you wanted based on whatever prompt that you're typing, but I have a good feeling that a lot of the people who are so gung-ho about AI generative art are the type of people who will give up on things when there's a slight inconvenience. They don't have the patience for that. Just from what I've seen, they're just the type of people who point at the end result and say it has soul because it has color, it has bloom lighting, it has rosy cheeks of the characters, and the characters are expressing somehow or making some form of expression. There's a part of me that wants to sort of ask them, oh, why would you use these colors? Or why did you use these certain strokes? Why did you decide to push certain elements versus others? Why did you draw the hand with 6 to 7 fingers, even with one finger morphing into another one? What specific parts do you like about Hayao Miyazaki's work, and how did you implement that in the art? There's a part of me that's curious about hearing them talk about the process. Here's another example that I want to point out that's not related to art. So another big hobby of mine is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and a bit of wrestling. I've been doing it since 2015, 2016. When I first tried it, got my ass kicked all the time. Over the time and over the years, things started to click for me. I competed a few times. I actually injured myself a few times where I can't wrestle or roll in a certain way because of injuries, but that in return helped me grow a lot because now I wrestle and roll in a certain way that's unique to me. And to avoid injuries, but jiu-jitsu also helped me grow as an individual, making me a bit more calm, understand how the body works, which in return actually improved my animation and drawing. I got to meet and befriend some really funny people in the jiu-jitsu community. So I did grow with jiu-jitsu because of both the positives and negatives that come with it. And when I roll and wrestle with other people, they have a very certain way of how they roll and wrestle. Some play open guard, whereas others want to be on top and give pressure. And again, the reason why a lot of these people roll in a different way is not just because they learned it or they practiced it, but they had to work with whatever they were given, which is their body. They had to deal with their injuries, and that forced them to work and roll in a certain way. And that in return gave them their own style of wrestling and rolling. It's also quite an expressive sport. Some people like to roll heavy with no mercy, and some are light and playful. And in the jiu-jitsu community, you'll hear stories of fake black belts being called out from actual practitioners. But to a normal everyday Joe, they don't really know that. They just see black belt and say, oh, this guy must be legit. And they get the benefits of admiration and respect through the practice of fraudery, without ever going through the grind of what it means to actually achieve a level like a black belt jiu-jitsu. So another issue that I find with AI is that it promotes this sort of gambling addictive nature. So you can write a prompt asking what you want and it'll deliver something really, really fast and it'll give you a lot of it. And as first impression, you look at it and say, oh, this is pretty decent. Let's see if I can get more. And let's see if I can get more. Let's see if I can get more. And you keep making prompts, you keep making all these small changes. Maybe the first few passes were good, but there's a part of you that just wants to keep exploring, keep seeing more. What's more to this prompt? What's more to this result? And I can see that being really, really addictive, where you're relying more on the AI model more so than your own creative intuition. And that leads to my other point. You become super reliant on the tech. When the tech is doing most of the work for you and you highly depend on that, then where's the artistic growth in that? So something that I'm scared about AI is that it promotes loneliness. So hear me out. It's getting to the point where a lot of people prefer talking to the AI instead of actual people. Now, I do understand the reasoning behind this, and I can see why people would rather talk to AI because it removes some of the emotional and the human biases towards certain things that you want to talk about. Again, convenience is a big word. And you can talk to an AI that doesn't really fight against you. It can just be very agreeable. I mean, sure, you can talk to a model that gives you more pushback and things like that, but most of that is in a controlled environment. But I do think a lot of experiences in life come from the interaction with other people. Whether you're working with other people, whether you're just saying hi to people at a cafe and just having a small talk, or family members with unique and very specific characteristics. I think getting into arguments and uncomfortable conversations is a part of the human experience. I think this adds to your overall experience as an artist in the world that makes it super unique to you. So I find a lot of joy collaborating with a lot of artists. Now, even though the projects I make are mostly solo, it's kind of really cool to hear someone do voice acting for your characters or to make music for your idea. And you guys are like spitballing ideas together, figuring this thing out together. And I think a lot of that builds character. Over time, I realized that there's a lot of nuances when it comes to creative projects or making creative work. Like, why would I use certain brushstrokes? Or why would I emphasize a certain thing in the art piece? Or why would I use certain themes in my work? Actually, this whole AI fiasco has made me a lot more reflective on my work, and in a good way. And let me explain why. Like, for a long time, I've always wanted to make something that would impress people, but, that became so oversaturated to the point that a lot of these things just felt like cool stuff. It didn't really resonate with me. So when the whole AI generative art started picking up, it made me realize that there's people who just care about the results on a surface level basis. A lot of people, especially those unfamiliar to the process of art, don't really care about the process of art or how hard someone worked to make that piece of art. But there's also a rise of people who are looking at a lot of this AI stuff and seeing it as generic because a lot of them have the sort of same tastes. So instead of trying to make cool and impressive things, I've been trying to fight for the themes I want to showcase in my work. I want to push certain things. I want to become more of a storyteller. Like, the reason why I've been doing these really stupid casual shorts is to kind of find out what my comedic sense of storytelling is. what my own personal sense of humor is, and how do I tell the type of stories that I want to tell. If someone else was going to tackle the same story, they're going to tell it in a very different way. And I think that's a very beautiful thing. Now, one of the common arguments I hear with like pro AI artists is that AI is being inspired by the way humans get inspired, and I honestly don't agree with that. AI collects data. To be inspired means to be emotionally moved, and as human beings, we're kind of biased, where there'll be many of us looking at the same piece of art, but we're going to be inspired by it for different reasons. Like, let's say me and a few friends are looking at a piece of art. I'm inspired because I like the way this person drew faces, and another person is inspired because they like the way certain thematic statements are pushed within the art. We all were emotionally inspired by this art, but for different reasons. Whether those reasons are cultural or other things that appeal to us more than others. And that's going to dictate how we're going to proceed with making things later down the line. Another argument that I hear is that a lot of us artists use digital tools, therefore, how are we different from an AI artist that also uses digital tools or a computer? A lot of the skills that I do on the computer can be transferred on paper or on some other medium. I still have control over my strokes. Another argument that a lot of AI artists want to point out is, oh, what if we're disabled? What if we can't pick up a pencil because for some other reasons? There's a lot of artists who are handicapped, who are disabled, that are able to make art, some of them being blind. And I think that actually strengthens the whole idea of why the process is so important, because they had to make it work based on the circumstances and limitations they had. Second, it's so disrespectful to infantize handicapped or disabled people like that. Third, are you yourself handicapped or disabled? And if you want to just learn how to draw or make art, you can start immediately. And if you want to learn tutorials and things like that, start with the free ones that you can find online. That's why I think this whole making art democratized is such bullshit. So if I were to summarize my overall thoughts in this video, I think AI promises convenience, which I think is pretty good, but I think that convenience can be mistaken for replacing an entire crucial process of making art or creative projects. Something that enables you to find your own voice, something that encourages growth with a lot of hardships, and something that really encourages the human experience. I think AI as a tech can be very addictive because of how fast it churns out results based on a prompt. Even if you are satisfied or happy with an earlier pass, there's a part of that curiosity that wants to see more with it, to the point where you fall into this wormhole. I feel like I don't want to be at the mercy of the AI model or the tech. I want to get my hands dirty. I want to just make stuff regardless of the tools that I'm given. The process of making something is where I discover a lot about myself. Now, are there ways that AI can be used as a tool that's good for artists or artistic growth? That's a whole discussion of its own. And also, I'm not here to talk about what makes the most money or what gains the most clout. That's not really what the discussion is about. And for this video, I really just wanted to talk about the artistic growth. Now, this video is not me saying that you should suffer or struggle when going through a creative process. I know there are artists who are gung-ho about the struggle and the suffering, which I don't really care about. But wouldn't it be nice over time that you mitigate those struggles through the experiences that you've had going through such inconveniences? Not because you're using some AI model tool, but you're using new skills learned and experiences from going through hardships. And you can take ownership of that. Like nowadays, I'm working a bit smarter and I've learned to work in a certain way where I don't repeat the same mistakes, or I try to avoid it as much as I can. And I can proudly take ownership of that. I think the biggest one that I learned that I'm preaching over and over again is learning how to differentiate between the laborious part of a project and a creative part of a project, and how finding a way to organize that made me a lot more efficient with my work. If you're using generative AI as a huge part of the process, then there's a few things that I want to ask you. What exactly do you learn about yourself and your work through the heavy reliance of AI models? And are you being too reliant on the AI model? What kind of conveniences and inconveniences do you face with the AI model? Can you still be creative and produce some form of work regardless of the medium without the use of AI model? If you could explain every decision that's made on the art, whether it's a facial expression or a brush stroke or certain colors and certain compositions, is that something you can talk about in a deeper level? Look, despite making creative work is hard, is frustrating, there's a lot of hardships, there's also a lot of problem solving, there's a lot of growth. And I personally think you don't need AI to feel that sense of accomplishment. And my channel has always been about the process of making a creative project from the beginning to its end road. And I talk about the process of things all the time. I talk about what I learned, I talk about where I succeeded, and I talk about where I failed. And I'll share some tips and advice that have helped me that may hopefully help others out there. I honestly don't know what the future holds, where things will go with this technology, but I'll always have a sense of pride knowing that the things I have made are human made, based on very personal experiences and things I have learned during the process. Interested in learning hand-drawn animation or learning how to finish an animated shot from beginning to end? Have a look at the store where you'll find the complete Introduction to 2D Animation video course, tutorials, and other resources. Learn classical animation approaches, drawing, lectures, techniques, and other process videos. Visit the store through the link in the description below.